She told me how to feed my own kids and I let her have it. Now my ex wants an apology. She stood there in a school hallway, in front of my ex-husband, and told me I need to step up my mom game. My kid's teacher was right around the corner. And she said it like she had every right in the world to say it. Let me be very clear about something before we go any further. This woman has hated me since the moment she realized my ex-husband was willing to leave her the second I gave him a hint of a chance. And now she was standing in front of me trying to lecture me about frozen vegetables. The audacity was almost impressive. So our poster is a divorced mom of 2 kids, an 11-year-old and a 10-year-old, sharing custody with her ex. They communicate through an app. She keeps things business only, and she makes it very clear that she and her ex's wife have absolutely no relationship by choice. Both sides dislike each other, and she keeps her distance as best she can. That is her whole strategy. Minimum contact, maximum sanity. She has built an entire system around not letting these people take up any more of her life than the logistics of shared parenting require, and for the most part it has worked. She does not text unnecessarily. She does not make conversation at pickup. She does not ask questions she does not need the answers to. She has essentially constructed a wall made entirely of professionalism and she has stayed behind it, because she knows what is on the other side of that wall and she has no interest in it. Now the backstory here is important because it tells you everything about who these people are. The wife was the other woman during the marriage. When our poster found out, she kicked her husband out and filed for divorce. But then she did something that people still apparently cannot get over. She let him believe a reconciliation was possible. She told him to cut the other woman off completely, which he did, and then she told him she had no intention of ever actually getting back together with him. She said she could not be with someone who had treated her the way he had, and she meant it. Think about what that took. She had just had her marriage blown apart. She was processing betrayal and grief and rage all at the same time, and instead of just reacting, she made a deliberate and calculated decision. She wanted to know what he would actually do when forced to choose. Whether he would throw everything away for the other woman or whether, when the chips were down, he would come crawling back. He came crawling back. And then she closed the door. There is something almost surgical about that, and it clearly left a mark on everyone involved. Now here is where it gets interesting. The wife has never forgiven her for that. Not for the affair being discovered, not for the marriage falling apart, but for the moment where the husband chose to leave her, even temporarily, at our poster's suggestion. That is the wound that never healed. She has apparently told anyone who will listen that our poster tried to destroy their relationship out of pettiness. She framed it as some kind of manipulation rather than a woman testing whether her husband would actually choose her. The self-awareness in that room must be absolutely zero. Because think about what she is actually saying. She is saying that the real villain of this story is the wife who was cheated on, not the man who did the cheating, and not the woman who helped him do it. She has rewritten the entire narrative so that she is the wounded party and our poster is the schemer. And she has held on to that version of events so tightly and for so long that it has become her whole framework for understanding the situation. That is the lens through which she looks at everything, including the children, including the cooking, including every minor interaction at every school event. And just to complete the picture of who we are dealing with, the husband has cheated on this woman twice since they got married. Twice. And she still blames our poster for the dysfunction in her marriage. Not her husband, who has now cheated on 2 different women. Our poster. The woman he cheated on first. That is the level of logic we are working with here, and that is the person who decided she had the right to critique someone else's parenting. At some point you have to wonder what it costs a person to maintain that kind of thinking. To watch your husband betray you not once but twice and still refuse to recalibrate who you are angry at. That takes an enormous amount of energy and an enormous amount of denial, and it says everything about where her head has been this whole time. Now let's talk about the food situation because this is where it gets genuinely funny. Our poster buys frozen vegetables to save money and reduce waste, and she buys frozen fruit for smoothies. She also buys fresh fruit when it is something they eat whole rather than blend. That is called being practical. That is called feeding your family intelligently on a budget without throwing money away on produce that goes bad before anyone touches it. There is nothing wrong with this, and nutritionally there is a mountain of research to support it. Frozen vegetables are often picked and frozen at peak ripeness, which means they can actually retain more nutrients than fresh produce that has been sitting in a truck and then on a shelf for days. She is not cutting corners. She is making smart choices for her household, quietly and without broadcasting it to anyone, because it never occurred to her that anyone would need to have opinions about it. The wife, on the other hand, has a garden. She grows her own vegetables. And she is, by all accounts, very loud about how fresh is best and how frozen vegetables are basically garbage. She has apparently debated this with other parents at school events, which tells you a lot about how she spends her energy. Picture that. Standing at a school fundraiser or a parent-teacher night, steering conversation toward the moral failings of buying a bag of frozen peas. She has convinced herself that her food is superior and therefore she is the superior presence in these children's lives. The garden has become an identity, not just a hobby. It is the thing she points to when she needs to feel like she is winning something, and in the absence of anything more concrete to hold on to, it has become enormously important to her sense of self. Here's the part that makes the whole thing absolutely delicious. She started asking the kids directly whose food they prefer. Her food or their mom's food. And the kids, both times, and apparently every time, said mom's. They told her they always finish everything their mom makes. They said they do not always finish what she makes. They were not trying to be cruel, they were just answering honestly when asked a direct question by an adult in their lives. Children that age have not yet learned the social grace of softening a true thing to protect someone's feelings, and they probably did not understand why the question kept being asked or what it was really about. They just knew the answer and they said it. And she kept asking. She kept going back to the well hoping the answer would change, and it never did. Which means she was not asking out of genuine curiosity. She was asking because she needed the validation, and every time the answer came back wrong, instead of stopping, she tried again. That is a person who is deeply, privately losing something and cannot figure out how to stop the bleeding. So this has clearly been sitting under her skin for a while. The garden pride, the fresh versus frozen debate, the kids preferring the other woman's cooking. All of it piling up quietly in the background like water rising in a basement. And then one day she and our poster are both waiting outside a teacher meeting in a school hallway, the kids are not present, and she decides this is the moment. The air probably had that particular tension that comes right before something goes sideways, the kind where you can feel the other person recalibrating and you instinctively brace. She unloads. She rants about frozen food. She compares buying frozen vegetables to feeding children McDonald's every single night. Her voice is probably a little too controlled, a little too rehearsed, like she has been running this conversation in her head for months and finally found the room to have it. She tells our poster she needs to step up her mom game. And she says it like a verdict. Like she has been appointed to deliver this news and has finally found the courage. I genuinely want to know what she thought was going to happen there. Did she think our poster was going to nod and say thank you so much for this feedback? Did she think a grown woman, a mother, was going to stand in a school hallway and accept parenting advice from the woman who helped end her marriage, with a teacher right around the corner and absolutely nothing to back up the critique except a backyard tomato plant? The setup alone is almost too much. So our poster told her she would not be taking advice on feeding her kids from someone who thinks frozen vegetables and McDonald's are the same thing. And then she went a little further. She pointed out that if the kids always prefer mom's cooking over yours, maybe the problem is not the frozen peas. Maybe the problem is the cook. That landed, clearly, because the temperature in that hallway must have dropped about 15 degrees. Both the wife and the ex demanded an apology immediately after the teacher meeting, which tells you they were likely standing close enough to hear most of it. Our poster got in her car and left. Her ex followed up through the app asking for a formal apology, which she ignored completely. Now I want to sit with that moment for a second because I think it is important. The husband, the man who cheated, who ended the marriage, who got back with the woman he cheated with, who has since cheated on that same woman twice more, is now sending messages through a co-parenting app demanding that his first wife apologize to his current wife for clapping back after being told she is a bad mother. That is the request. That is where we are. He typed that out. He hit send. And somewhere in his mind that felt like a reasonable thing to do. She fired back. She did not start it. She did not bring up frozen vegetables unprompted. She did not walk into a school hallway and tell a woman to step up her parenting. She was cornered at a mandatory school event, lectured by someone with absolutely zero standing to give her any advice on anything, and she responded. And now she is wondering if she was wrong. Let me give you my honest take. No. She was not wrong. She was cornered by someone who has been building up resentment and looking for an outlet, and when it finally came out in the most condescending way possible, she pushed back. The only thing I would say is that the cook comment was sharp, maybe sharper than necessary, but it was also accurate. If you keep asking children to compare the meals and they keep choosing the other parent's food, that is information. She chose to hear it from our poster instead of from reality. The ask for an apology is the most telling part of all of this. It says that neither her ex nor his wife actually believe she did anything meaningfully wrong. If they genuinely believed she had, they would know she was not going to apologize by asking through an app. The ask is performative. It is an attempt to position her as the aggressor in a conversation she did not start. She should not apologize. She has nothing to apologize for. She fed her children well, she minded her business, and when someone decided to make her business theirs, she responded. That is not an offense. That is self-respect. Grandpa left everything to me and now the whole family is coming for the house. She is living in temporary housing with her 2 kids, her grandfather just died, and her family is already threatening to take her to court over the house he left her. Let that sit for a second. The man is not even buried and the people who barely visited him are already making legal threats. So our poster's grandfather recently passed away. He named her as both the executor and the sole beneficiary of his entire estate, which includes his house. She is a mother of 2 currently in temporary housing, meaning she and her children do not have a stable permanent home. This inheritance would change that entirely. It would give her children a real home, stability, a foundation to grow up in. A place where they can wake up in the same bedroom every morning, hang their drawings on the walls, and feel like the world is not constantly shifting under their feet. That is not a small thing. That is not a technicality. That is life-changing in the most fundamental, everyday, irreversible way. Now let us talk about who is lining up to challenge this. Her father, who is described as an addict, extended relatives, and cousins. Not people who were named in the will. Not people who maintained a close relationship with the grandfather in recent years. By our poster's account, she was the only one who visited him regularly and kept a genuine relationship with him toward the end of his life. She was the one who showed up. She was the one who called when it was inconvenient. She was the one who sat in the living room with him, who listened to his stories, who made sure he was not spending his final years in silence. The people now demanding a share of his estate are, in her own words, people who had little to no relationship with him. They were not there for the hard, quiet, ordinary work of being present. They were somewhere else. And now that there is something to gain, they have found their way back. This pattern is one of the most common and most painful things that happens after someone dies. A person lives out the end of their life largely alone or with one dedicated family member who shows up consistently, who calls, who visits, who sits with them, who makes the drive even when it is long and even when there is nothing to celebrate. That person absorbs the emotional labor of being someone's person. They carry the weight of watching someone age, of having the hard conversations, of being the face someone sees when they are scared or lonely or unwell. And then when that person dies and leaves something behind, every relative who disappeared for years suddenly reappears with a handout and a lawyer's name. The grief has not even settled and the negotiations begin. It is almost a script at this point. It happens in families everywhere, and every single time, the person who actually showed up is the one left defending themselves to the people who did not. And the grandfather knew exactly what he was doing. He did not forget to name anyone else. He did not make a mistake. He sat down with the understanding that his time was limited. He thought about who had been in his life, he thought about who had shown up for him, and he made a decision. He had a will, he had an executor, and he named one person to receive everything. That person was our poster. He made a deliberate, considered decision about what he wanted to happen with his estate, and that decision reflected who had actually been present in his life when it mattered. Wills are not random. They are not oversights. They are the last statement a person makes about who mattered to them and how they want their life's work to carry forward. He did not owe anyone else anything. He chose. The legal threat angle is worth examining directly because it sounds scary, but it is much weaker than these relatives want it to seem. Challenging a will is genuinely difficult. You cannot challenge a will simply because you think it was unfair or because you feel you deserve to be included. The bar for a successful challenge is specific and high. You have to prove things like lack of mental capacity at the time the will was made, meaning the person did not understand what they were signing, or undue influence, meaning someone manipulated or pressured them into changing their wishes. Simply being a relative who received nothing does not give you legal standing. Feeling overlooked is not a legal argument. Showing up after someone dies and declaring that you expected something is not evidence of anything except your own expectations. These relatives can make noise. They can send threatening messages. They can throw around the word lawsuit. But noise is not the same as grounds. Now I want to address the emotional side of this because it is real and it matters deeply. Even when you know the legal position is probably on your side, being threatened by your own family in the immediate aftermath of a death is its own specific kind of devastation. The grief is already sitting on your chest. The loss is already there, already heavy. You are already navigating what it means to lose someone who mattered to you, someone you actually knew and loved and chose to spend time with. And then the people who should be grieving alongside you are instead sending threats and drawing battle lines. They are treating a funeral like a business transaction. They are making you defend your relationship with your own grandfather to people who were not there for it. That is a betrayal layered directly on top of a loss, and it deserves to be named out loud. What she is feeling right now is not just grief. It is grief with a knife in its back. But here is what I want her to hear clearly. Her grandfather made his wishes known in the clearest, most legally binding way a person possibly can. He wrote them down. He had them formalized and witnessed and made official. He named her specifically, not by accident, not as a placeholder, but because she was the person he chose. Honoring those wishes is not greed. It is not selfishness. It is not taking something that does not belong to her. It is respect for the man she clearly loved and who clearly loved her back. Giving in to pressure from people who were absent would not be generosity or keeping the peace. It would be allowing people who did nothing to override the final, documented, considered choice of the person who mattered most. She would not be doing him any honor by handing his legacy to the people he deliberately left out. She also has 2 children who need a home. That is not a minor detail woven into the background. That is the central fact of her entire situation right now. She is not a wealthy person looking to accumulate property. She is a mother living in temporary housing who has been given the chance, through her grandfather's love and intention, to give her kids something stable and permanent and real. A place that is theirs. Her grandfather almost certainly knew her situation in full. He knew she was struggling. He knew what she needed. And he made his choice with that knowledge in hand. The house going to her is not just what he wanted legally. It is almost certainly the exact outcome he was hoping for when he sat down and signed that document. My verdict here is simple. She should keep the house. She should consult a probate attorney as quickly as possible, not because the legal challenge is likely to succeed, but because she needs someone in her corner who can respond to any filings and make sure the process moves forward cleanly and without disruption. She should not negotiate with the relatives outside of a legal setting. She should not offer any money or partial concessions in exchange for them dropping the pressure. The moment she opens that door even a crack, it becomes a negotiation, and there is nothing to negotiate. The will is clear. The grandfather was clear. The only people who are not being clear are the ones who want to rewrite a dead man's final wishes because they do not like what he decided. To the family circling like they have some kind of claim, I want to be direct. You did not show up. You did not sit with him. You did not call. You did not make the drive. You were not there in the ordinary, unglamorous, showing up on a Tuesday kind of way that actually means something to a person at the end of their life. She was. And he remembered. That is the whole story. A will is not a document you get to rewrite because you showed up late and feel bad about it. She owes you nothing, and neither does her grandfather's memory. So drop a comment below and tell me which story hit harder for you today, and if you want more of this, a like and subscribe goes a long way.